Sunday salutations, everyone, and welcome once again to Mathematical Morality. This episode is the trolley problem, or basically 5 people tied to a track versus 1 person tied to a track. You are the person at the lever who can flip the lever and send the trolley hurtling down the other track to kill 1 to save 5. What is the moral thing to do? With me today is William Johnson, a former sergeant with the U.S. military.
That is correct.
Yep, and basically I'm because of the fact that I honestly do not have a correct answer to this problem, especially the concept of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or whatever is the correct response to that. I'm turning it over to him to give his perspective on this issue.
All right. Well, for those of you that are not familiar with the problem, there actually is a similar link going on around Facebook, where the several questions are involving a vehicle and a crosswalk. It's essentially the exact same problem with a variation on it, utilizing such modern prejudices as overweight versus in shape, male versus female, and various races. And the trick here, as Guthrie was saying, is that you at the middle position there have the ability to flip that switch to move the trolley to a completely different track, saving 1 or 5. The question comes when we have to consider, and the average trolley driver would not have this, and the average person would not have this. We have to consider who those 5 that are tied to the track are versus who that 1 that is tied to the track is.
Yeah,
if those 5 that are tied to the track are, for example, the 5 greatest scientific minds of a generation versus the 1 who is not quite as adept at that knowledge, do we save the scientific mind and allow the lesser adept to live? Yet in that same problem, let's reverse it and say that the 1 that's tied to the track is the lone scientific, most experienced and brightest scientific mind in a generation versus the 5 who are not. To be honest, there isn't really a good answer to the question, because what it actually illustrates is the folly of human thought. Saving 5 versus saving 1, or saving 1 versus saving 5.
Yeah.
As far as the answer that I would take, again, you have to weigh the value of the targets.
Yeah. And I guess the question that this ties in with is with real world applications, is questions like how are we supposed to we are faced with problems like this all the time, like trying to get rid of one group for the ostensible good of the rest of society, or what nation should be saved versus war zone scenarios like this come up all the time. How do we determine what is the ethically right thing to do in these kind of circumstances? Is there an ethical right situation to kill? And honestly, I have no answer for this, so that's why I'm kind of wondering what your experience from being from your perspective from being ex-military, especially for ex-U.S. military, would be on this.
Well, we have to consider the fact that in a war situation, there is no such thing as ethics. And I know that sounds weird and odd to say that, but the bullets are going to land wherever they land. Sure, you can direct the bullet to go where it will, but there's so much that you can't control.
So once that's out of your hands,
quite honestly, it is.
And the
Or
same
within itself. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, and I was going to say, and I'm assuming the same is also kind of the problem with the trolley solution in more modern in more peacetime scenarios like economic stratification or determining who gets what resources in a society or that kind of thing.
Well, it's interesting you say that because society determined resource allocation is actually not really on the same plane as a combat situation, because, as I said, there is, once you get into combat, morality goes straight out the window. 'Cause let's face it, when is it ever appropriate to take another human being's life?
Mm-hmm.
It really isn't. And I would recommend anyone who's interested in this the study of Confederate General Stonewall Jackson, who was a proponent of the total war strategy, a strategy that pretty much said that when it comes to a combat situation, wipe out every army that you encounter to the man, leave no one behind.
So this way, there's not a chance of the war continuing.
Exactly.
But yeah, I guess the reason why I was mentioning the resource allocation problem is that technically couldn't it also be applied to the trolley problem as well, in the sense that by determining how resources are allocated, you could actually determine to a certain extent whether a person actually not only lives but lives productively, or whether they live a shortened lifespan compared to the 5 on the other track.
Well, I suppose you could, but you also would have to clarify what you consider to be productive.
And that in and of itself would also be another aspect for this. I'm beginning to get the feeling that I may have to do a multiple series of these videos and redefine the trolley problem for different scenarios, because this is going to be a little bit more in depth than I thought it was.
Yeah, considerably.
Yeah. All right. Well, that gives us the introduction to the trolley problem for this week. Unless there's anything else you wanted to cover, we'll table it till next Sunday.
Well, I suppose we could, but I will leave with this. As a situation there, would you be able to flip the switch and move the trolley to a completely different track? If you have the time to flip the switch, why do you not have the time to save the individuals on the track?
And that right there may be our our possible method of solving the problem. If there's a way to save all the people on the track, then there's a way to actually, now that I think about it, what if saving the one person on what if flipping the what if you see the train coming far enough that you flip the switch but run over and save that one person on the track? This way at least the trolley still goes down that one track and nobody need to get hurt.
It's an interesting answer to the problem, but that assumes that you have the time to perform that. And even if you didn't, even if you're able to flip that, even if you're able to flip the switch, and you somehow manage not to get there and save that one person, you save 5 people, rather than you save the lives of 5 people in the process of trying to save the life of one.
Yeah. So at least with that scenario, there's a chance of saving 5 or 6 people. Either way, you've at least done your best from the pragmatic perspective.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I think that actually provides the answer that the system was. I think that actually finally provides the answer for that the system would advocate in such a scenario, is try to save all people. But if you can't save all people, at least you tried. All right. Well, maybe then in that case we can apply that as a new model for various issues pertaining to economics and other stuff like that as well, is to try to provide the resources for all available to their best optimum. But if you don't manage it, at least you tried as many as possible. And the same could go for economic. The same could go for an economic resource distribution system. Not in the way of communism, but in the way of actually trying to provide the resources so that everyone. Again, this would require defining productivity, defining optimum, and this kind of thing from an empirical standpoint. But at least it could be done, possibly.
Yes, the attempt can be made.
All right. Well, thanks again, Will, for your perspective on that point, and. Thanks again for helping me actually provide an answer for this one, and thanks again all to those of you who are listening as well. For those who would be further interested, there are links in the description below about the trolley problem and that was one other thing I did want to cover. There was a video that was recently released which suggested that Star Trek's Federation is inherently a fascist system because they suggest the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Would that be considered? Would that be accurate in your assessment? Because that ties back to the trolley problem of trying to save as many people as possible.
Well, I think those who are proponents of that video have a flawed understanding of fascism, because the Star Trek model is actually closer to socialism than it is being a fascist system.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. Just wanted to check that because they were making quotes about how Hitler wanted to destroy capitalism and all this kind of thing. So, okay, fair enough. That at least addresses that as well. With that in mind, thanks again everyone for watching, and stay tuned for our next episode next Sunday. 5 versus 1 need not be 5 versus 1. It could be all 6 if you're lucky. All right. Stay tuned for the next episode next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. And as usual, keep rocking.